Good morning, I'm Weston Zimmerman, and today I'm going to show you some more detail about this project in our backyard where we did these pavers. In part 3, I think it was, we showed you the paver install from beginning to end. Today, I want to kind of roll back and show you my thought process in how we did the paver inlay right here, and the products I selected, the challenges I run into, the mistakes I made, and ultimately how it turned out, and what I would do different if I would install another one. So before we get started, I'm just going to show you my design. So I am standing right here at the back door. This is the living room of the house right here. This is where I laid in that inlay. Here's the outdoor kitchen. Here's that Umbriano summer wheat patio out over there. And you can see that my wall, I originally had my wall running into the corner of the kitchen, and then it stopped. And then there was another wall here to hold that back. And ultimately what I did is I connected these two walls and just made one big wall. And I pushed this wall back about 5 or 6 feet so that I could walk through here around the corner of the kitchen. And I'm really glad I did. It gave me that extra space that we needed. But these are the designs that I want to show you now. So what I did is I wanted to get as big of a square paver that I could find in Unilock's catalog for the kind of the floor, like where my toe is right here. I used the Umbriano summer wheat. I think these are 16 by 16s. They're not 24 by 24. And then I used Unilock's copthorn for the outside edge. And I used the copthorn to kind of create the contrast diagonal pattern in between the Umbriano as well. And I also installed Tribeca around the outside edge of the overall inlay, just to kind of give it a border and a make the contrast pop right there. That's what I'm talking about. And what happened is this big square paver that Unilock had, I believe, was 80 millimeter, so it's thicker than the rest. So like all of these pavers out here, they're 60 millimeter, but this big one is 80 millimeter, and then the copthorn was 60. And then this Tribeca was 70. So I had 3 different thicknesses in this design, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend. I would avoid if I could, but ultimately that gave me the color and the contrast and the sizes that I wanted. So I was like, well, big deal, I'll just go ahead and do it. And boy, was it a pain. Basically what I did, if you look back on the time lapse, you can see that I screeded all of the number 9 setting bed stone out for the height of the 60 millimeter paver, this copthorn, or this quartz stone outside of here, the cobblestone looking paver. And then I had to re-screed the area for the inlay down to the 80 millimeter depth. Then I laid in the big squares first. Then I laid in the copthorn pieces in between the big squares. Then I laid in the Tribeca, and then finally I laid in the quartz stone up against the white Tribeca paver there on the edge. If I were to do it again, I would switch it. I would screed only the 80 millimeter first, lay that all in, then lay in the copthorn paver in between, then lay in the Tribeca, and then lastly I would screed again for the 60 millimeter and put the quartz stone right up against it. So one of the mistakes I made is I tried to lay in this black cobblestone quartz stone paver first, and then I tried to do the inlay second. And if I were to do it again, I would switch it. I would do the inlay first and then just lay my quartz stone up to it. Because what happened is I had a hard time working out on math, on paper, like how much of a gap I was gonna have in between each one of these squares with the diagonal pattern. Like I knew how wide the paver was and all that, but between the gap for the paver and for the sand joint, and I just did my math wrong like 3 times. And what ended up happening is I had already laid in this quartz stone, so I had to rip out the quartz stone to make room for the overall inlay, and then it was off center, and it was just a mess. So I could have avoided all of that if I would have just laid in the inlay first and then done the quartz stone out around it and just laid right up to it. Another thing that I did that I wish I'd have done differently, you can see that I cut this quartz stone in half because I was worried, I wanted to get this inlay perfectly in the center of this 20 by 20 pavilion. And if I were to do it again, I would not cut that. I would just let that a whole paver, and I would just shift the whole inlay off center to 2 inches. You'd never be able to tell that the inlay was off center 2 inches, but you see that cut paver every time you walk out here. At least I do. It's like every time I look at it, I'm like, I should have never cut that. I should have just pushed the inlay off center 2 inches, and then I could have had the quartz stone all around the whole thing without any cuts. So when you're planning these things, it definitely is worth it to do some math and do some planning and do some thinking to try to minimize the amount of cuts you have to make, because cuts are visible, you know, especially in that kind of thing. But anyway, I definitely didn't do the most efficient install job on this. It was the first time I tackled an inlay like this. I call this the Instagram style inlay, meaning like it's one of those high contrast, kind of almost modern flare inlays that you see on Instagram. And I had done inlays at Tussey Landscaping projects before, but never quite this complex. And like I already said, I had 3 different depths, 3 different pavers, and it was definitely a challenge. If I were to do it all over again, I could probably do it in 1/4 the time that it took me to do this. At the end of the day, I just scrapped my math because I was trying to come up with the math of how wide is this entire inlay going to be so that I could center it, like from this line all the way over to this line. I would just scrap my math and I would just start in the center and lay this center paver first, dead nuts in the center of the pavilion, because you can easily measure that corner to corner. Then I would just lay out on each way, and then it's in the center. But I was trying to figure out where the outer edge was going to be so I could lay my quartz stone up to it, and it was just yeah, I wouldn't do it that way again. It took way too long. Coming back to this design here, I pretty much did what I had designed there, except that you can see that I did the quartz stone, or I'm sorry, the copthorn paver in a sailor course instead of a soldier course. So a sailor course is when the paver goes with the edge the long way. Soldier course is when you would flip this paver. Actually, I can show you right here. This is a soldier course paver border, and over here this is sailor. And then at the front door, this design pretty much panned out exactly like I had planned it on paper, but I did another little mini paver design right here. I'm gonna go show that to you. It's raining out here, so you get to see the beautiful color. But right here at the front door, I did another inlay, and it was pretty much the same. I had an 80mm paver there, 60mm copthorn, 70mm Tribeca, so it was just as difficult, but it was just much smaller, not nearly as hard to do the math. But what I did in this case is I laid the copthorn first, the red brick paver around it. I overlaid it, then I just measured, found my center, or laid these 4 pavers on top and figured out my size and centered it, and then I cut the red paver out and laid the inlay in. If I were to do this one again, I don't like that. I would move the whole thing out this direction until that point of the inlay would just line up perfectly with the edge of the white Tribeca paver there. That's probably my own critique on this design in hindsight. But what I did do, I was trying to center this red centerpiece directly in the center of the little stoop that we have here, like this little roof that we have here. I was trying to center it perfectly in that, but I don't think you would have your eye doesn't really even draw a correlation to that necessarily, standing back and looking at it now. But you do see that right there, which bothers me, and I would just push it out. But it still looks cool. It's a cool way to accent a front door, and I'm glad I did it. Looks really nice. Some design principles I always like to kind of use is contrast. Different textures and different colors to contrast both texture and color. So in this example, it's doing both. I have like an old world brick copthorn paver here, and then I have a quartzy style rippled texture white paver here for the border. And I just love the contrast that it gives. But in hindsight, I'm really happy how the whole thing turned out. Like, it was very difficult to put in, but it turned out exactly like I had imagined it, except for my cut over here on the edge. That still bothers me to this day. But the craftsman knows his own mistakes. Most people probably would walk in here and never even think about that, but I do. After doing it, some of the things that stand out to me as important to make a good inlay is the contrast. Contrast of color and texture, as well as even design. Because you can see in my whole backyard here, I got this old world quartz stone and brick type paver, but then I kind of contrasted here with this modern diagonal inlay. It almost looks like an outdoor rug, you know. And so if I were to do it again, I would again look for ways to contrast the color and the texture and even the design. Like I like kind of my blend and my mix of the old world with this. At least I do. Maybe some of you are thinking I'm trying to mix the old world artsy type palette of paver and design with the new world modern, and maybe that bothers you, but I like it. I like how it turned out. The other thing that I did in terms of design, I used Umbriano's summer wheat paver out here against the Quartzstone cobblestone paver. My inspiration for these two pavers together, I saw a picture online when I was doing a bunch of research on the different types of pavers that Unilock has, and I love the contrast. I saw this one picture in a driveway. I love the contrast of it. And I was looking for something that wasn't the modern gray kind of vibe, because we live in more of the woods and the mountains here, and I wanted more of those earth tones, not necessarily the grays. And so I figured out, this was not a driveway, but I figured out how to incorporate those swooping curves like that, and the paver here, which is, this is also a smoother paver, which is nice for the kids riding their bikes on. That Quartzstone cobble paver is definitely more bumpy for the kids to ride their trikes and stuff on. So I didn't use any straight lines, as you can tell. Like, I use flowing lines the whole way around, and it flows over into here, which is where it goes over around the corner of the outdoor kitchen and goes over to the fire pit over there. I have the chairs there, but then it's kind of swooping, like there's no straight lines. And it's just a design choice. Like, I always kind of grew up doing projects with the flowing lines. More and more in the modern world, you see the straight perpendicular designs, which I kind of appreciate both. I just opted to go for the flowing and curves. I just like how it looks. Right here is the only straight lines that I used in the whole project. So yeah, that's kind of a rundown of how I planned and how I laid out this whole design and this whole backyard. What I wanted to do was connect the backyard to the front yard with a sidewalk, so that people didn't have to walk through the house to get to the front yard if they come in for a barbecue or something. I wanted to create a dining area and a living area. So you can see the tables right there in the center as our dining area, kitchen's right there, and then this is kind of like the hangout chill area around the fire pit with the big deep seating wall bench. And then out here, I just wanted to put this in as just overflow. So if we have a bunch of people here, we can just set up chairs, tables, whatever, and have some overflow area here. Plus the kids use it all the time to ride their bikes. So definitely glad that I have a functional dining area, functional kind of living and chilling area, and then just some open expanse to spread out when people are here and kids ride their bikes on and stuff. But those are kind of the things that go through my mind when I think of design, is where's the dining, where's the living or chilling, relaxing area, and then of course we have the kitchen worked into it. And in my case, I wanted the extra room to expand and have some overflow area. But so thanks for watching. Drop me your thoughts in the comments on how I did on the design, how I did on the inlay, and what if you've done these inlays and what you've learned to make them go well. But we'll see ya.